Hi, I'm Alan Hedblum. Welcome to our show, a place to feel like you belong. During the course of our conversation, you'll notice words and phrases appearing at the bottom of the screen. These will be explained later in a follow-up segment called Would You Say? For now, let's welcome today's guest, Mach Makuei. Most of us lead safe, comfortable lives. But how would we respond, separated from our families in a war-torn country and locked up in a refugee camp for half of our childhood? Our guest today has experienced all that and more. Today in the studio, we welcome Mach Makuei. Mach is a survivor of the Sudanese Civil War, a 2008 graduate of Albion College, and a budding entrepreneur in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Mach, welcome to Feel Like You Belong.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
So you grew up in a country now known as South Sudan, but your childhood was anything but normal. Tell us about that.
That's true. South Sudan had the longest civil war in modern history. From 1983 to 2005, over 2 million people died and over 4 million people were displaced. I was born in a small village called Duke. In current South Sudan. We were forced to move out by the government force. The war was mostly between the north and the southern part of the country. The northern part of the country is mostly Muslim and Arab descent. And the southern part of the country is mostly Africans and mostly Christian. So we were attacked by the government. Our village was attacked. And as the village was attacked, we were forced to move, to flee. And in that process, I went different direction with a lot of people in my family.
Okay, and at that time you were separated from your parents?
Correct.
Okay, and who fled with you?
Some of the village members. We were helped primarily by the UN on the way there in terms of food and just the basic needs.
So now, did you lose relatives in that attack?
True, yes. Yes.
Okay, some aunts, cousins, uncles?
Yep.
Okay. And this, you were 7 years old?
Correct.
So this is pretty scary business.
It was very hard to try to make sense of everything.
Mm-hmm.
I really, growing up, you kind of hear a little bit about the war and everything else, but when the reality hit, it was kind of hard to comprehend.
Mm-hmm. Did you feel like you were in immediate danger at any time during this period?
Not really. It's as weird that is. We were just, we just kind of really didn't have a great capacity of knowledge about just really what's, the process of dying and, how bad thing could happen kind of situation.
You were just saying the adults said come and,
yeah, exactly.
And you went along.
And you hear guns and guns are not good and there are bad guys coming and you need to get out of the way.
Okay. So you fled across the border into Kenya, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And went to a refugee camp?
Yes.
Tell us what that's like.
A refugee camp, we flew into Kenya. We got set up by the UN because there were no jobs. It was not like we moved into a big city and you could get absorbed into that city. This was just, we got crossed into Kenya and the UN basically started to start a city basically. That was made up mostly of tents and huts that were made of mud.
So like just in a big field?
Just a big field in the northern Kenya, which is always hot and dry and basically in the desert. Okay. There was no running water, no electricity. Everything was provided by the UN, the schooling, the food, the clothing. Really, everybody was just there helpless.
How many people in your camp?
I would say close to about 50,000 people, and there were people from different countries as well.
50?
50. There was no running water and no electricity.
That's a medium-sized city.
Correct.
Without streets, without real buildings, without infrastructure.
I would not call it real buildings. The UN made some roads, kind of dirt roads, so they can reach people or go drop off food or medical supplies into some of those spots. Mm-hmm. Yes.
And at that time, then you had no idea what had happened to the rest of your family, your parents, for example.
No. It was way back. There was the internet and the information were not moving as fast as they are right now.
You weren't fleeing with cell phones.
No.
iPads.
And then never heard of a telephone to begin with until years later. Mm-hmm. I never heard of a phone until I was 10, 12 or so.
What was school like for you kids?
School's tough, but everybody knew school was the only option. School was provided by the UN, and it was a big deal. I remember my first class was under a tree. We just had a blackboard under the tree, and that's where we sat.
How many kids?
I think there was about 30. We kind of make up our own chairs, maybe build something on the ground where we can sit on, and life goes on. You just got to learn.
Who were the teachers? Were they other Sudanese?
Yeah, there were other Sudanese, and there were some local Kenyan that just kind of moved in because having 50,000 people dropped in by the UN, they kind of have to bring people in, and people who can teach from different part of Kenya kind of moved in the area, and 50,000 kind of create a certain kind of economy.
It's an instant city, yeah. Instant economy.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So
who paid the teachers?
The UN.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It sort of reminds us that the UN is doing really important work in the world, and we need to continually support them.
There's no doubt about
efforts.
that. It's just sad that you will never see that work being glorified anywhere. Mm-hmm. And they do a lot of glorious work.
So you're thankful that
there's no doubt about that. I'm very thankful.
Yeah.
I can imagine being here without the support of the UN and generous people who donate their money and time. Mm-hmm. So
you were there with Deborah, your older sister, and Deng, your younger brother.
Yes.
So what's that like for a sort of a family of siblings, no parents, living there? How does that
It was
work?
not.
How does
it
that
was
feel?
not. Yeah, it was not that bad because our culture is more family oriented, really. Okay. So there was family members and everything else.
So aunts or uncles.
Yeah, and it's growing up almost it's the community is always just like one large family.
Okay.
So you almost just kind of get absorbed in.
Sure.
And we were not the only kids, kind of like they're just people missing, Mm-hmm. So we basically just kind of make up.
And I think Americans tend to take the view that it's all about the nuclear family.
Yeah.
It's parents and kids sort of only, but when you spread out the relationship, it also spreads out the responsibility and sort of lessens that separation.
I think I remember even some kids, if their uncle don't have all girls, they send a cousin go live with them and just kind of help out with the boy stuff, whether it's looking out the cuddles or doing other boys' work, or you could just see families just moving around, and that structure really did come in handy and did help me out and did help out a lot of kids.
Yeah, you were telling me earlier that one story about how even back then you had a kind of entrepreneurial instinct. Tell us about what you did to earn a little bit of money at the camp.
It's in the refugee camp when we had running water. The water that the UN provided, there were a time where the water would run, a tap would run, and
just like nonstop.
It would, you can turn it off and on.
Okay.
But there would be time where it just shut off.
They cut it off.
Like the old TV, when there was time where the TV would go off.
Okay.
There were time where the water would just go off.
Got it. Okay.
I don't know whether a lot of younger people remember that. There's time where the water would go off just completely. And they do that 3 times a day, where they'll turn the water on in the morning and noon, and then between 6 and 8 or something like that. And myself and a couple other people decided to use that water that was, being spilled, and dig a trench, a tunnel, funnel that water into a ditch, and we use that ditch, that water, and grow plants. Carry buckets and go water, plant with that water and sell that to people.
So it was a hand irrigation system.
It was a hand irrigation system.
Okay.
It was tough because you never know how much water you're going to have,
Sure.
or whether you're going to have water.
And even back then, as a child, you recognize, a precious commodity.
Exactly.
I can make a business out of this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then since then, my mentality, every time I look, look at a product, I always, like, wow, I did that first and come up with that. How, that, like, my brain just always keep turning like that.
Looking for opportunities.
Yeah,
and I'd like to
exactly.
go there in just a minute, but to make this transition now. So you were there 8 years, so
Yes.
actually longer than when you had been alive.
Correct.
You left there finally at 15 and get flown to the middle of, like Mars, we were saying earlier,
Exactly.
Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Exactly.
Right. And there's this wonderful picture we have of you freshly arrived at Gerald R. Ford Airport, you and your brother, and pictured with a senior
friend.
member, an
Yeah.
older friend of the Sudanese community.
Yeah.
And there you are in your Mighty Ducks jersey. And I'm looking at that thinking, this young boy has no idea what is a Mighty Duck.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what was that like? First, you get off the plane. What time of year?
It was December 20th. I think there was about 2 feet of snow on the ground.
You had never experienced this.
No, it was just unreal. I was just fascinated with everything. It was just.
So what was the hardest thing to adapt to early on? Because totally everything is new.
Yeah, everything was new. I mean, the language was not easy.
Okay. Because you didn't study English in the camp.
We studied English a little bit like people do here with Spanish or
Okay.
secondary languages where you go to school, learn it, and come home and never speak it.
Okay.
Kind of situation. But that was one of the hardest part. But it's in a weird way, everything was so different where there was no push and pull kind of reaction. Where like I have this kind of culture here and I can make this. Everything was so different to the point where like I really just gotta dive in. There's nowhere to start because everything was so different. There's nowhere to start. The school, the food, everything else. So it was just like really me immersing into in the culture. So that kind of helped out a lot in a weird way. Everything was so different.
Can you give an example of one thing that just totally shocked you?
One of the things that actually shocked me the most was seeing homeless people. I did not expect that. I had this.
Because this is the land of milk and honey.
Exactly. I had this idea, but everybody was doing well. And when I moved here, I was very fortunate to live in a very nice area, and happened to go to Chicago for a weekend to visit a family friend, and saw homeless people on the street. And that was the springtime, like 3-4 months after I've been here. And in the winter, you don't see those. We drive from a suburb to church and schools, and everything made sense. Everybody that I had met was doing real well. And then when I went downtown Chicago and saw a homeless person there, my 15-year-old mind did not really understand that. Why is that happening?
Here in
the U.S.
Yeah. So you and your brother and sister were taken in by a foster parent.
Yep.
Catherine. Tell us
Yes.
about her.
God, she's easily one of the smart people I know.
Okay.
My family is as strong as any family there is. I don't even know how to explain. Yesterday, 2 days ago, I was talking to her on the phone, and I told her about how she used to make cinnamon rolls, and how I haven't had them in a while. And I'm like, Mom, can you make those for me? And she's like, yeah, I'm gonna make them over. Do you want me to bring them over? And it's just small things like that.
What was the adjustment like? Because here is a single woman, and all of a sudden, instant teenage children in her house from from Michigan.
Exactly. It was just, it's amazing how we just. I mean, for us, we really did. It's just the choices were not there. We were like, all right, this is where we are, and having the culture of struggle and having to make the best out of every situation. We were given a great opportunity to make the best out of the situation. And we made the best out of the situation. We really just, I remember the first night, the first meal we had, I think we had some lentils and rice.
Okay.
And in the camp, we had a lot of lentils. And we were like, wait, what?
This is camp food, man.
So yeah, there were just small things like that, and have her take us to the barbershop, and just small things like that. But it just.
What's something that she taught you?
What did she taught me? God, it's so hard because everything I know, I got it from her.
Okay.
It's really hard to just come up with one.
Okay.
Whether it's just hard work, the way you carry yourself, and really be the best person you can be. Yeah, it's really hard to pick one out.
Okay.
Just having an overall be a well-rounded person, whether it's academically, socially, culturally, just be a well-rounded person.
I think I need to point out to our viewers that this sort of human being is also rare, because there are every year thousands of refugees that come to the United States, but it's not easy to find, host families, foster parents for this. So if you could make a pitch for the foster agencies out there, the refugee agencies, what would you say that is available to people who open their hearts and their homes?
God, I wish my mom was here to answer that. I think she would give a better answer than I'm gonna try to say. It's I mean, the culture, just learning. I mean, every day you could just learn something new, whether it's studying where they're coming from or learning about their food, the language. There's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. It's the experience you get, the relationships you get. I mean, it's, being with Mom Catherine, she taught me just about everything I know, and I couldn't be more thankful.
Okay.
And I'm sure the kids, if you give any kid an opportunity, I would say there's a very, very good chance they are going to do very, very well.
Well, I'm sure she's very proud of you, and you're doing already great things. And let me just launch over into that topic then. We were talking about entrepreneurship. You've got a couple of projects that sort of merged that are on your plate right now. Yeah. Tell us what you're doing in the business community.
I'm a struggling entrepreneur. Have a very strong entrepreneurial spirit. I went to college and really never had a dream of. I studied international studies because it was fun, and I get to talk to business classes, sociology classes, psychology, anthropology, and I was just all over the place. It required me to just be well-rounded.
But your current business is this moving business.
Yes.
I really like to, because we're going to wrap up in just a minute.
Okay.
But I'd like to hear more about this, because truly a great idea.
Oh, thank you. Right now, what I do, I supply limited truck rental companies. If you rent a U-Haul and need someone to help you load it or unload it, or budget trucks or pods, and a couple of companies, I kind of help them out. They have a national company that facilitate their moving services. And right now, what I'm working on is I started a company called PayMyMove.com and National Apartment Movers, where we work with apartments. We help market apartments for about half a monthly rent or so, based on their fees. And if they approve somebody, we will go pick somebody up and move them into their apartment for a flat monthly fee. So basically, all you need to do is, it doesn't cost the apartments to sign up on our website. We are a performance-based company. Our job is to send traffic to the apartment complex. And once they approve somebody, we will go pick them up and move them in. And
so for our viewers, what's your website?
It's called PayMyMove.com or National Apartment Movers.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we will get the word out to our viewers.
Thank you.
Just thrilled to have you here and share
here.
your story. It's a powerful one that more people need to hear.
Thank you.
Thanks much.
Yep.
And for those of you who are watching us online and on TV, stay tuned, because we'll be coming back ever so shortly with our follow-up segment called What'd You Say? Glorified. This is a word which means praised or given special recognition. In the case of the United Nations and the work they are doing with refugees, Mach said that their work isn't being glorified or given the full recognition that it deserves. Displaced. During the conversation, Mach said that many, many families were being displaced by the war. This means that they're being forced out of the places they lived and made to seek shelter in other regions and countries. For a full list of the new or difficult expressions that you heard during our conversation, go to our What'd You Say webpage at feellikeyouBelong.com. Today's news comes from across the pond in Geneva, Switzerland, where students at Webster University's Geneva campus are getting a hands-on feel for the lives of international refugees. The student-run Webster Humanitarian Association offers an intensive 3-day simulation that participants will not soon forget. According to blogger Roberta Medrano Callejas, the first day as refugees began with a 5-kilometer hike to the Webster campus. The group was divided into 2 traveling families, both with difficult stories, both fleeing from persecution, with children, including 2 sacks of flour to represent babies. Both families were told that they had lost family members along the way. When the hikers arrived at camp, an actor playing an official was waiting for them behind a desk, guarded by a soldier dressed in black. His head was covered with a balaclava, his eyes hidden by sunglasses, and hands holding a club-like weapon. Then the intimidation started. The refugee families were separated, questioned, and searched. All belongings were taken from them except clothing and medication. The separation from Callejas' family scared her, as did the disdain on the guard's face and the hostility he displayed. A sense of unwelcome hung in the air. One by one, they were brought to speak to the man at the table. While the questioning went on, the others were forced to sit silently in the hot sun, away from everyone else. After the questioning, each was taken to a small, stuffy room and told to wait. They lost track of the hours and struggled to entertain themselves with stories just to pass the time. Throughout all of this, they took turns caring for the flour sack baby with other family members. Next, they were taken to immigration and separated again. Anxiety grew when they realized that the 2 officials didn't speak their language, and the papers they needed to complete were in an entirely strange language. The men made angry gestures and cursed, all the while trying to get the required information out of them. While some were questioned, the rest were again made to wait in silence in the sun and threatened by the guard with the club. At this point, participants were told that during this process, the women are often repeatedly raped. Time passed without recognition. Everyone was thirsty and hungry. They hadn't had a thing to eat or drink for 8 hours. The next thing to do was to set up tents and collect water. Bathroom breaks had to be escorted by guards. Dinner was eaten as one big group to minimize the loneliness. The bedding was minimal, and the night was cold. A tiny breakfast followed in the morning, and the rest of the day was spent cooking a kind of flatbread made from water, salt, sugar, and flour. With the bread, they had the option of bartering with the guards to acquire extra bedding or better fuel for the fires. The first 2 days, they were taunted by passers-by and made to feel like zoo animals, and a repeat of the dehumanization of the immigration process. That second night was awful, according to Callejas, and participants felt exhausted after hearing more refugee stories. Within hours of falling asleep, the tents were raided by the ones who had chased them from their homes at the beginning of their flight. They were dragged out into the cold night air in their socks, without anything to grab for warmth. When they were dragged away and blindfolded, other raiders re-entered the tents and killed the babies. They brought out their little bodies, tossed them in front of the refugees, and kicked them toward the horrified family members. They took a significant amount of the food, threatened them with guns, and constantly yelled at them in foreign languages. Then they were made to stand, still blindfolded, and spun around until any sense of orientation was lost. When the raiders finally left, the family got to see the damage to the camp. Their babies were dead, the food supplies much shorter, and their belongings a mess. People were traumatized and exhausted. Participants went to bed tired, wet, cold, and dispirited. The last day was quieter and allowed for more reflection. Most of it was spent packing up the camp and waiting around a lot. The refugee simulation was humbling, traumatizing, and so very heavy on the heart. However, Calleja said she would repeat the experience without hesitation because it had been so thought-provoking. Webster Humanitarian Association at Webster University's Geneva, Switzerland campus promotes learning, human rights, and equality. Awareness-building activities include marking special United Nations days such as World AIDS Day and World Refugee Day. With its home campus based in St. Louis, Missouri, Webster's Geneva campus boasts students from 90 different countries. So today's high five, fist bump, and tip of the hat go to Webster University for making us all a little more aware of real-life issues going on in our world. For more information, we'll have a link to the Webster site on our What's Up page at feellikeyouBelong.com. Some jokes are jokes about themselves. They're called meta jokes. The word meta comes from Greek and it means above or about. These kinds of jokes are for very brainy people, like my son-in-law, who sent me today's cartoon. The writer, Randall Munroe, is a super geek, and he's famous in high-tech circles in California. His online cartoons involve stick characters. Now, these are simple to draw, and they let the reader focus on the language of the cartoon. He often writes about computers and math, but sometimes he does language jokes. If you are a math and science geek, you might like to start reading his work. The cartoon today is about the difference between causation and correlation, which are very important concepts in science and technology. If you don't understand this joke, check out the What's So Funny section of our website at feellikeyouBelong.com. There, we'll also tell you how to find more XKCD cartoons online.